Welcome back to Interjections. Corner kick FC prevails 2-0 over Lecce. A tough, gritty away win. We're going to break it all down for you. I'm your host, Andrew. I'm here, what's left of this once proud English language Inter podcast. All that's left. Jay, what's happening?
It's just us real ones here. There's no more performative members like Irfan and Miko. It's only the real ones, the day ones, the ride or dies. Here we are, working through the sweltering heat to deliver the greatest Inter podcast this side of. Where do you live again?
Let me just tell you. The answer is Detroit, and it just snowed last night.
Fair enough. It's been 36 degrees all weekend here, so yeah, I am. I can't believe it's almost March already, but I'm looking forward to this end of summer.
On that note, we are accepting applications to permanently replace Irfan on this podcast. We would have done it sooner. There's just nobody available. So if you're interested, drop us a comment. We'll gladly interview you and finally kick Irfan to the curb.
We're waiting for the statute of limitations to expire.
We no longer need his legal services, so there's really not much use for him on this podcast. Well, let's get into the Lecce match. I'm hesitant to call this a dominant performance. On one hand, Lecce had nothing. This is the worst attack in Serie A, least amount of goals scored, and it showed. We gave them nothing. They had 0 shots on target, 3 shots total, 32% possession, and not once during this match did they threaten us in our box. And much like the home fixture that we played with them literally last month, this was simply a matter of, are we going to find a goal? And to our credit, as we often do under Kivu in the league this season, we found that goal. We found 2 to be exact, and that's 5 consecutive away clean sheets we've kept. And you've got to start with the corner kicks. It's the story. DeMarco is going to set the single season Serie A assist record. And what's really cool about the set pieces is the variety of way we score the goals, because it's not like we have one guy who's just scoring all of them. There's an equal distribution of goal scorers, and it's not like every goal is a towering header. We've seen like nice routines like that Zielinski screamer against Verona, and Basek last week. And yesterday, the first goal was Mkhitaryan making a heads-up play with his wet noodle of a shot, managing to score. So Akanji grabs the second, and just 2 goals from Kivu substitutes. He changed the course of the game. We get the 3 points, and we just continue to rack up these corner goals. As frustrating as our corner defending has been this year, our corner attack is absolutely absurd. We're doubling up the rest of the league in corner goals scored. They feel like penalties in themselves. I mostly just have positive things to say. I mean, this was a tricky spot. You're missing Barella, you're missing Lautaro and Hakan, and it's an away fixture. Brutal spot after the disappointment of the midweek. And you heard my thoughts on the Subito that this in many ways screams drop points, but Kivu's team has always delivered in these spots. And for all the criticisms we may want to give him for what has happened in Europe this year, the fact is that every time we're in one of these spots, he has prevailed. We've come through and we've gotten the job done. So credit to him. I will say, like, this performance wasn't a thing of beauty, despite like all those stats I threw out that like we were clearly the superior side and we weren't giving Lecce chances. It's not like we were creating high scoring goal chance after another or just banging down the door. It was a bunch of they were a bunch of half chances with some poor decisions in the final third, specifically thinking about Luis Enrique. But I guess, Jay, I want to start with the striker duo. I want to get your thoughts. Lautaro was in incredible form before the injury. He was scoring at a ridiculous clip. We had to turn to Thuram and Pio. Neither score, but we still get the win. So what did you think of Thuram and Pio, given that's our new striker duo moving forward?
Wet Noodle FC sounds about right. I mean,
Yep.
it was a dominant game. I don't think you can call it anything else. In the first half, we ended with 14 or 15 shots, which is literally a shot every 3 minutes, which is quite an absurd statistic. But I totally get why it didn't feel dominant at times because despite the volume of shots we took, none of them ever felt particularly threatening. It didn't ever feel like we came that close to scoring. Maybe that Luis Enrique shot or that volley that Falcone saved, but otherwise, I mentioned this during the game that it felt like Thuram and Pio had taken like 5 shots each at some stage. Totally possible given the amount of the shots on the stat board, but I couldn't remember a single truly dangerous chance, and it was just kind of like half chance after half chance. Just I won't say lazily because that's a bit of a disservice to our guys, but without really sweating too hard for it. Kind of low effort or minimum effort, half chances just repeatedly hurled at the Lecce goal, and finally, as you mentioned, Mkhitaryan scored from the weakest shot ever measured in professional football. But it was enough to break down the hatch, and then obviously Akanji managed to secure the result. But going back to our strikers, Pio, I still think needs a lot of development. That's I think very obvious to see in the way that although he's got a lot of assists this season, there are still many times where he doesn't really understand or read the play properly and often picks the wrong decision, especially in transition. You'll see it when there's maybe a simpler pass on for him. Fratesi, for example, made a lot of good runs, but very frustratingly, very few people ever picked him out. And I felt Pio was quite guilty of that. Uh, there were times when, without really, again, I won't say he wasn't thinking or anything like that, but there were times when he opted to just lay off the ball immediately, first touch, pass back directly to the person who passed to him, just kind of ping pong it back to them. And I was thinking, mate, you had time to trap the ball, turn, and maybe release like a deal for a Enrique or Fratesi running down the right flank, but it's a simple matter of lack of experience or awareness on Pio's part that prevented him from uh, making these correct decisions. So today's game really highlighted that for me. That despite all the positives for Pio and all the thoroughly deserved credit and recognition he's getting, he's still very much in development and needs a lot of game time. So thankfully, uh, he's going to get that game time, even though it comes at the expense of Lautaro being out. As for Thuram, it's a really mixed bag with him because I still feel like he's doing the fundamentals correctly, but there's just definitely some cutting edge missing from him, and it seems to have been missing from him since he returned from injury. There's just a really blunt version of the player that was previously there. He might still score a goal here and there. I think he scored against Pisa, which wasn't too far ago, but overall, I felt like maybe it was Sassuolo, but overall, I feel like you've got like a really diminished version of the same player. He makes the same runs, makes the same kind of attacking connections where he can, but the final balls aren't as good. The runs aren't as powerful and surging. The shots aren't as crisp and powerful. And you can see that there's a lack of confidence there and just overall sharpness. So, bit sad to see. I'm not really sure if it's a case of is he still nursing some discomfort there, or is he just hasn't found himself properly in terms of getting into the speed of the game following his rehabilitation, or is he just mentally checked out? I don't know what the answer is. So there are some question marks ahead of him for sure.
Yeah, I can't really figure him out. There was a point when he returned from injury where he was scoring goals. I mean, he scored against Como, he scored in the Coppa Italia, and it looked like he was not back to his full self, but at least he was clinical in front of net. And now it's just fallen off a cliff, and he's not. His balls in the final third are very poor. I thought this was the most athletic he has looked in a while. He had a few nice runs cutting in from the left. With Lautaro out, he had to be more involved in the build-up play, especially with Pio in the middle of the pitch slash, hog and time in the box. So I was happy with how he looked from a fitness level. I'm hoping it comes together now that he's going to get a steady run of game time. But yeah, it wasn't a great performance from Thuram. I was a bit happier with Pio's performance. He He's really useful when you're playing against these smaller sides because even though he's so young, he can really physically impose himself on the defenders. And I agree, there's not a lot of nuance to his game at times, but it's bothersome and it's something you don't want to play against. And it kind of helps, like if you as you're trying to beat down the door with the battering ram, so to speak. Like he physically wears on opponents, and I think you'll see him play 90 minutes a lot more than Tram based on both their style of play and just the different aspect he provides to the team until Latoro comes back. So happy with his performance. There's a couple other guys I want to touch on. We're spending a lot of time talking about Sucic lately. Uh, He was once again voted by Gazzetta as the worst player in the first team. I thought he was quite poor and the worst member of this midfield. I was happy with Fratese's performance. I thought this was Fratese's best overall game in a long time. He was involved in build-up play. He had two really nice dribbles through the Lecce defense. But Sucic, on the other hand, just was constantly being bullied off the ball by Lecce defenders, and it really feels like we've hit a wall in his development. And at this point in the season, he is who he is, and he's not going to get better. And it's disappointing because when he first, he came into the squad and he scored a screamer against Torino, and it looked like he was going to replace Mkhitaryan on a full time basis. It really looked like we had something here. So we get away with some heavy rotation yesterday because of the suspensions, starting this, shoddy midfield of Fratesi, Zielinski, and and Sucic. Any thoughts from the midfield? Anyone's performance you liked from that trio?
I have to agree with the Sucic criticism, but I will say that it's probably too early to say that he won't develop or that this is kind of where the buck stops with him. I think there's a bit of a lack of specialization with him. We haven't really found what he excels at, or he hasn't found a way of really making his best qualities shine, whatever they might be. I think there's obviously some technique there. We've seen now a number of times that he's gone for these kinds of what do you call it, like a little slalom, like he did when he scored against Fiorentina. He did that a number of times, or he's done that a number of times since then. He did it today against Lecce. He did it against Juve, I believe, and got fouled right outside their box, and that inexplicably wasn't called as a free kick. So there's a technical player there to a degree. At the same time, we're not really seeing tons of like incisive forward passes or anything either. So it's quite hard to get a read on him, I think. He's obviously covering a lot of ground, so we've got that part of it, or rather, that part of his game seems to be a reliable contribution. But for all the ground he covers, he's extremely lightweight and gets bullied off the ball quite easily. He's not defensively very intelligent either. I think he puts in a lot of effort covering ground, but he's not always in the right position defensively. He's not really putting in great challenges or interventions either, and there is a little bit of that headless chicken kind of thing to him. But he is still young, and he does still need that time to develop. So I, as far as Sucic goes, I'm happy for him to get a stretch of games. I felt like today there was a weird kind of head loss with him. It felt like he kind of cracked the shits at some point. For those that don't know, that's like an Australian term for saying he kind of just like lost his shit or like kind of got triggered or flipped out or whatever you want to call it. But I feel like there was a point in the game where he kind of just got like upset or angry or frustrated at something, let that get the better of him, and just started being like, yeah, fuck it, and just started sprinting around doing whatever. And playing with more emotion than control or discipline or tactical instruction or function for that matter. So maybe it's just me, but I kind of felt that from him at some stage during the game. But in any instance, despite these shortcomings we see from him, not to compare him to the vastly inferior Aslani. In a similar way, Aslani really struggled to showcase his best skills so much to the point that we still don't know what they are. I guess relatively when everything else is like a 1 out of 10 and your passing is like a 6 out of 10, you could say your passing stands out, you know what I mean, by by sheer default. I don't think Sucic is quite anywhere near that bad, but we're still waiting for him to really showcase like a combination of his best assets. But like I said, he'll get a stretch of games now with Chalanolu and Barella and Mkhitaryan all being a little bit shaky in their I guess, in how closely they're gripping their starting places. Barella's had an injury, Calhanoglu's had an injury, and Mkhitaryan's had an injury earlier on, and none of them are playing particularly well. So Sucic will get some time, but it's up to him to really to turn that into something meaningful and consistent and play in a way where we go, okay, this is what he's good at. This is how he's able to take what he's good at and really make a difference with it. Because right now it seems a bit pedestrian. As for Fratesi, yeah, I was happy for him to have a good game, and I know that I'm a bit biased towards this guy as a player that I really like, but I don't think he can't. I don't think you can not be happy for him, um, despite all the noise about his sale. And I feel like he gets a lot of hate for his lack of involvement in the kind of passing game. But a game like today showed he can pass, he can defend, he can hassle, he can fight when put into the right scenarios. But you just don't ask him to sit there passing backwards and forwards and sideways, getting 50 passes per game, because that's not what he's built for.
Yeah, completely agree. And I've mentioned this in the past, but do think him and Zelensky is a good midfield pairing because they complement each other well. Whereas Sucic and Zelensky, it gets a little bit redundant at times. Speaking of pairings, my last observation from this game before we talk about Bodo, I want to talk about Luis Enrique. This this was an interesting game from him. I thought this was the most confident he has looked by far in a Inter kits. Like this was the most roaming he was willing to be. He wasn't playing safe back passes. And I guess there are two competing theories. One is you're playing Lecce, who offers absolutely nothing going forward. As a result, you can give him a little bit more freedom to his game. He's not worried about positioning, and you can just let him go attack. The other theory is that Barella's not on the pitch, and Barella holds Luis Enrique accountable in a serious way that scares Luis Enrique into not making the most attacking choice when possible. So regardless of what it is, this was the game where he had full capacity to roam forward, cut inside, do whatever he wanted, and it was a mixed bag to put it best. He had the shot in the first half that he didn't quite strike cleanly. That was ended up being a pretty easy save for Falcone. And then the other big moment I'd say was he had dribbled through the wing, cut inside, had a passing lane to Pio, didn't see it, instead, pulled it back to Vertesi, and the ball was too far behind for Vertesi to realistically do anything with it. So this was yet another start for Enrique. Obviously, Darmian got the start midweek, but this guy has been our starter for the best part of 3 months now, as Dumfries has been hurt. I don't know if we can sit here and say there's been steady development since then. He probably looks like an acceptable Serie A player, but not someone who will ever be good enough to be our starter. Any thoughts on his performance?
I tend to agree that it was a decent performance, but for me, it was kind of more of the same. The the shot that he took, I mean, it was on target and it was controlled. He didn't go for some Barella kind of wild lashing out and putting it into Rosette. He made a controlled side foot, but at the same time, it was very much like a let's just get it on target kind of thing, and he should have probably buried that right. As for the rest of his game, like I said, very much more of the same for me. I do think he has improved in the 3 months that he's been starting, but I'd like to see more. I'd like to see a greater rate of improvement. It feels like when he started playing, he was just putting in these like 5.5 out of 10 level of performances, and then since then, it's like one of those. I don't know. It's like you're looking at a chart of inflation or something for a very very steady economy where the growth of inflation remains at like I don't know around 3% or something, 2%, whatever, for like the better part of a decade. It just goes up. It creeps up very slowly. That's what I feel like I've been seeing with Luis Enrique. When he started, he was putting in 5.5 out of 10, and now he's gradually his performance level has seen some inflation, and now he's putting in 6 out of 10, 6.3 out of 10, 6.5 out of 10 level of games regularly. But at the end of the day, 6.5 out of 10 is just nothing to write home about. I think he had one game that I give like a 7 out of 10, and that was probably the Sassuolo game, purely for the goal. But yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate because anytime you think like you've seen some development from him. You see the same safeness and unwillingness to take risks and the frustrating, I guess, hesitance hesitation from the player. So yeah, I don't really know what more he needs to take that step, or if this is it. But again, even to say, like I said, for Sucic, it's still early for Luis Enrique as well. What is he, 23, 24, 25? You know, when did Maicon come to Inter at 25, 26 years old? You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of players who do need some time to really blossom into to anything near resembling their final form as such. So Luis Enrique, I think, is still kind of, I think his mind is still in a mode of like, I need to not get sold. I need to kind of like save my bacon. You know what I mean? He's still in like self preservation mode more than like playing with freedom and trust mode. So, but yeah, it's up to him to kind of get over that mental hurdle and actually put in some effort and really take a game by the scruff of its neck, because we're still some ways away from that.
All right, let's move on and talk about the return. Actually, before we talk about Bodo, I want to get last thoughts. Milan dropped points midweek to Como. I talked about this on the Subito with Sterling, but the world wants your thoughts. How? What is your Scudetto confidence now, knowing there's really only one final boss in the way in terms of our head-to-head battle with Milan?
I stand by my early season predictions that this is going to be the worst season in the history of football, with Arsenal winning a treble and Milan winning the Scudetto. So I stand, but I'm a man of conviction.
I want the record to show that it was myself who predicted Juve would miss the Champions League, and while I'm not confident Roma will do the job next week, there's reasons for hope, if nothing else. So let's talk about the Bodo return leg now. This is a big lift. There is a lot of work to do if we realistically want to make it to the next round of the Champions League. We're going to have to score 3 goals to avoid a penalty shootout, because a penalty shootout is a death sentence with this team. It's not like we were cutting Bodo open at will in the first leg, but you have to hope that playing on a normal surface at least gets our feet back under us and we can play at a better level. We're not going to be rotating nearly as heavily as we did midweek either. The job really going to Bodo was always try and keep it close so we can overturn this thing at home. We didn't do it, and now we're pushing a boulder up a hill. Frankly, I don't feel optimistic about this one because of how heavy the lift is. Maybe if Lautaro was healthy, I'd feel differently, but we're going to have to get 3 goals out of some combination of Bonnie, Pio, and Turam. It's a big lift. I'm also concerned because, frankly, Bodo looked good cutting through our defense last game. But anyway, the people have heard all my thoughts on this. Sterling and I talked a lot about this on the Subito. So I guess before we dive too far into this match preview, is there anything you wanted to call out from the actual match last week that struck a nerve with you, Jay?
Well, yeah, I'm gonna double down and say it was an embarrassment. I'm perplexed as to why so many people, yours truly, oh wait, yours truly means me, doesn't it? You'd think I know this, but
Yes,
anyway,
but you mean me.
yes, I mean you. I mean the mongrel hosting the episode with me today. No, I'm perplexed as to why so many people are kind of willing to like, oh, it's a tough ground. They had good games and blah blah blah. Like, it's fucking Bono, guys. Like, yeah, it's good for football that this minnow has a reputation of being giant killers, but uh, I still don't see how we can excuse losing to them so easily, and in the fashion that we did so. I still feel like there's a kind of threshold of acceptable losses, and this is somewhat beneath that. It's not like we went to Atletico and you know lost 2-1 or something, or we even lost Arsenal or Liverpool or whatever. Like these teams with some degree of reputation and competing at like the highest level of their respective big leagues. This is again a team whose market value is worth 1/10 of ours, and their their star player is a guy who could barely feature on a rotation basis for one of the worst Milans in the last 50 years. And our excuse is what? Like, oh, they're giant killers and they play on a tricky pitch. Like, is that enough to for us to kind of stoop to that level? Apparently so. I still fundamentally think that we really underperformed here, despite the positives that you can, or the praise that you can lavish upon Bodo, which is deserved. Those things are separate, um, and despite the pitch being a disgrace. But in any instance, if we are who we want to be, if we are who we think we are or claim we are, then we need to go out here and just destroy them. Like when a giant, when you poke the bear and the bear wakes up angry, it doesn't, have a strongly, doesn't write a strongly worded letter. It goes berserk and mauls the fool who dared to venture into his den, right? So likewise, we need to respond in force and win this game convincingly. And it sends a message out to the rest of Europe because right now everyone in Europe is just laughing at Serie A. Juventus got humiliated by Galatasaray. We got humiliated by Bodo Glimt, and Atalanta went down pretty meekly against Dortmund. And I only watched the extended highlights of that game, but I swear 19 of those 20 minutes were all Borussia Dortmund. So it didn't look like Atalanta really got a peep in that entire game. So point is, Italian teams are not really giving the best account of themselves on the continent right now, and it's up to us and teams like us in spots like these to respond and restore a bit of pride. And like I said, given the kind of stature of the opponent, we need to. I feel like there is an onus upon us to remind people that hey, the Italian league is not some joke that it's acceptable for the best Italian league to get. Sorry, the best Italian team to get trashed by some team from Norway. These are not equivalent things. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you can say like the fifth placed English team is equivalent to like the best placed Dutch team or whatever, but like this isn't that. Like where would Bodo finish in Serie A if they competed in Serie A like fifth, sixth to 10th or something? I'd like to think that they can't really finish above like seventh or eighth as long as these teams like Roma and Lazio can stop being spastics for like all of 6 months, but might be a bit too much of an ask there. But you get my point. There is a need here to kind of reset the status quo and go, that was an anomaly. This is the status quo, and beat them comprehensively. So that's what I'm hoping to see. Do I think that's what I will see? I don't know. I really, really don't know. For some reason, I feel like Bonnie is going to play a really big part here. And I was meaning to talk about Bonnie in particular when we were discussing Lecce and even the week before. But there's something about Bonnie where I don't find him to be the most like tactically kind of functional player. I feel like he's very much like a wild card that you throw on and just let him do his thing. And sometimes his thing is exactly what you need, and sometimes I feel like it's really, really not. I feel like sometimes you want a goal and he's more interested in dribbling than he is connecting the ball to someone like Pio or to Zielinski or to Barella, whoever, right? I feel like better players in his position have that kind of awareness or sharpness where they'll use that skill to beat a man, cut him and take a shot or make some space and get a good cross across to their forward or whatever it might be. But Bonnie just feels very kind of head down, tends to dribble into trouble a lot, and it feels like he's again while that has some benefits to it because he might create some space down the flank or get a player booked or something like this. It feels a little bit directionless at times, and I feel like Bonnie is going to have to play a big part because I don't know if he can rely on Turam or Pio. And I feel like when Bonnie comes on the pitch, we kind of lose a little bit of that focal point in like a Pio or Lautaro. So because Bonnie goes walkabout and just dribbling around the flank and shit. So I don't know if we're going to be able to pull this 3-goal victory off. Naturally, I hope we do, because again, I maintain that the first leg, losing 3-1 to Bodo, is enough of a humiliation. But getting knocked out by them, maybe then, the doubters will finally accept that this is indeed a humiliation. And like I said, we need to rely on all three of our fit forwards to contribute in a meaningful manner.
Maybe the problem here is that we have suffered such a massive generational humiliation that every subsequent humiliation doesn't resonate with me as much. We're never going to equal the humiliation of last year. So does losing to Bodo really, rile me up? The answer is no. I'm a defeated man.
That's actually a good point. That's actually a good point. You can't kill what is already dead.
Exactly. So I'm not going to be. I don't think I'm going to be crying. I actually texted Sterling last night that if we finish the season with a domestic double and we still lose to Bodo, I'd be a pretty content person in Kivu's first season. With that being said, I just think we did so poorly in the first leg that we really put ourselves in a corner here where we could easily go out and dominate Bodo midweek and still not advance to the next round because we just did such a poor job playing football. The more I think about it, the more that first leg was truly disappointing. How little we created, how upset by the environment we were. Kiva was talking about how it's the coldest environment he ever played in. It's like I don't know. I just don't want to hear that stuff. I wanted us to go out and play, and we didn't. We created nothing that entire game. So I guess if you want me to sell you hope, it's that we should have close to a full strength lineup for this game. Obviously missing Lautaro, but the entire starting midfield trio should be back. The entire starting defense should be back. So we're going to be the better side. And at home, I do think we're going to be able to score a couple goals on these guys. My big concerns are how vulnerable are we on the counter, because we have been at times this season. And this Bodo team looks like they don't need a lot to create a chance. They had some great team play amongst themselves to score a couple of the goals where they were pressing us high. They forced turnovers and they immediately strung together a few passes. So that's concern one. And concern two is just going to be our potency in front of nets. As always, without Lautaro there, we don't have our most reliable finisher. We're going to need Pio and Taram to do something here. So those are kind of my areas of concern. But like, I do think we're 100% going to win this match. It's just a matter of what do we win it by? How much of a margin can we run up? And if we go out there and we score 4 goals and we just run through these guys and establish ourselves as the dominant Italian side in Europe yet again, I'll be super impressed with this team for the emotional bounce back. But uh, where my head's at right now is I'm seeing some sort of like 2-1 win where we spend the last 15 minutes of the game trying to chase that third goal and we just can't beat the door down. How are you thinking about this one?
Yeah, sadly, I gotta agree with you on that. I can totally see it going that way. Uh, there's something to that I've seen in a lot of the big games prior to, or even up until and including the Juventus games, maybe up until the fucking Bodo game last week, if that's something you can kind of consider a big game as well. But I mentioned previously that I hated how this team, like they tried up until a point, they tried just enough to try and fool any viewers, any watchers into thinking they at least tried, they did what they could, and maybe even fool themselves into thinking, oh yeah, we tried, but realistically they've already surrendered and they're happy to surrender and they know that they've surrendered. That's what I felt from these guys watching them in previous big games where they'll make like a token effort to attack, but they never really create anything incisive. No one really steps up and says, give me the ball, I'm going to take a shot. No one ever says, I'm going to attack this guy, beat my man, and get across into the box. It's all just like play it safe, pass around, throw a little bit more urgency, act like we care a little bit, and, and that'll be enough to say that we tried. And ultimately, you haven't really tried. You've just tried to pretend like you tried. And that really bothered me. So I hope this team has turned a page following the Juventus game, following the Dortmund game. My hope of that page being turned took a bit of a hit after watching the first leg of this game. But I hope that once again, we take the opportunity to take that step to turn that page and not fall into that pattern of just trying purely to, in a performative manner and just trying for the sake of trying, but actually just going out there playing with confidence and being the master of your own destiny, because that's what Bodo did in the first leg. The difference between us and Bodo is that they were having fun. They were playing with confidence. They were playing in that flow state. They were playing with a lot of vibe and a lot of good feeling, chemistry, and an enthusiasm to the game, whereas you could tell from the team's attitude that we went there with like, we're too big for this, but we don't really care at the same time. On one hand, they're balancing the fear of that kind of expectation of like, oh, we shouldn't lose this because we're Inter and they're a small team. So they're already kind of like scared of that expectation. At the same time, they're kind of balancing it with like, yeah, we really should win. So they've got that expectation, that weight on their shoulders as well. And then, and then that's playing like a big psychological battle in their heads before the ball's even kicked. And then you got to deal with like the fucking pitch and all this stuff as well. So hopefully, the fact that it's at home, the fact that the goal here is clear, and the fact that the expectation is clear as well should be something that helps these players just kind of get over that hump and do the job this time.
Do you have? I don't think you gave me a actual score prediction for the match. Do you have one to offer?
No, I'm not sure. I really don't know how to predict this one. I can see this going any number of ways. I could see us winning 3-0. I could see us winning 3-1 or 2-1, as you said, like getting ahead and then maybe Bodo peg us back one goal and then we put together a final scramble of 10 minutes, piling on the pressure, but maybe we come close, maybe we don't. Like I could see that happening. I could also see a scenario where we just concede a goal out of nowhere and just kind of fall apart and the game ends fucking 1-0 to Bodo. I can see that as well. So it's really hard to say. I can totally foresee any number of outcomes here, and they all seem fairly realistic within the scope of expectation that this team has created in these matches. So I don't know.
Well, we'll move on to Jay's hot betting tips, where you're expected to know, you're demanded to know. I know we are waiting on the result of Arsenal Spurs later today to round out one of your more recent hot betting tips. Curious to see where your head's at for this week. If I may make a request, I know we have a big game in the league next weekend where we have Roma hosting Juve, Juve's Champions League dreams hanging in the balance. What is this? 3 consecutive losses, 4 consecutive games that dropped points for Juve. So, any thoughts on that match as a hot betting tip?
Yeah, tough one. I think what's nice to see that we've kind of started, or maybe we've triggered like a bit of a mini meltdown for Juve. They've now lost, I think, 4 out of their last 5 or something like that. They lost against Atalanta in the Cup. Um, they lost to us, obviously, in the derby. Then they got destroyed by Galatasaray, and then they lost to Como as well just yesterday. So
And a draw to Lazio in there.
yeah, and draw to Lazio as well. So Juve go into this with pretty dire form, but at the same time, I have trouble trusting Roma and this Gasparini Roma in the big games. They feel like a worse version of us, where we seem to have like a spotless record against anyone outside of the big three or the top three. I feel like Roma are somewhat like that, where they have like a pretty good record against anyone outside the top seven. You know what I'm saying? So like that's why they've kind of put together enough points to sit in, I believe, 4th position. But they've at the same time they've lost 8 games, right? So that's the most out of any team in the top like 7 or 8. So I could see Juve putting together a really dog shit 1-0. I can totally see myself kind of getting psyched up to support Roma and you know do a good old hate watch and yeah, let's go Roma. Juve are down. Now's your chance to really make a statement and pile on the pressure, only for Roma to put in like some pussy ass performance. Dybala misses a penalty or whatever, and then and then fucking McKennie scores a header. You know what I'm saying? And then it's 1-0. I can totally see that happening as well. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but I will say a 1-goal Juventus win is most likely for that game. Uh, I would also like to congratulate the fans for receiving 2 successful betting tips in a row. Firstly, your 3-2 prediction of the derby, promptly followed by my prediction of Dortmund beating Atalanta 2-0. So not only did you get the result, you got the exact score line spoon fed to you, miserable ingrates. So, I'll give you a nod already. Epstein rich from interjections. It's your own fault. Let's be real. So, uh, continuing that with that vein, I've got a prediction for La Liga. Uh, it's Villarreal against Valencia. The game takes place in about 7 hours. Villarreal are actually doing really well this season. They're coming third or fourth. I think they're ahead of Atletico Madrid even. So I'm gonna say that Villarreal take this one quite comfortably. I'll give it a 3-0 victory for Villarreal. 2 goals from Tajan Buchanan. What do you think about that one? From Brampton, Ontario.
The Canadian national team starting right wing back. He'll be scoring against Italy in the World Cup in no time.
Is that where
Very
you're from?
optimistic.
Brampton, Ontario.
No, I know a good man named Louis who is from just outside of Brampton, but that is far from my parts.
Where are you from?
It is literally like a 10-minute drive from Detroit.
Is that Vancouver? I don't know my Canadian geography. I've only heard of these big cities like Quebec and Vancouver and Montreal and Ontario and Alberta, Canada. But I have no scope of where on the map these pins fall. I just know the names. But
Canada is the second largest country in the world by area, but if you draw a line through like the bottom, I don't know, 10% of the country's geography, that's where all the people live. So it's all the same place, really.
so it's basically just Australia then.
Yeah, yeah. You guys all live on like the southern slash maybe southern east coasts, and nobody lives in the north, is my understanding. Same thing.
Yeah. Exactly. Everyone lives on the south, the east coast, Sydney, Melbourne, and then the remaining 99% of the country, especially inland, is practically abandoned like a Serie A match in prime time due to dilapidated stadium facilities. So
I know you're bummed out because you missed the opportunity to see Como
you love
defeat
us
Milan.
in Perth, yeah. I still don't know why they chose fucking Perth of all locations, considering Perth is like Australia's fifth city or something like that at best. So it just goes to show the horrendous planning and marketing of this league. But what can you do? Huh?
The business acumen of Serie A football clubs, not high. All right. Well, we'll wrap it there. We'll be back. We'll do some sort of Subito post Bodo, break down the match for you all. Until then, Jay, please do us the honor.
This is the test, the kind of mini test that we've been looking for. We've spoken about all these big games lost under Kivu, right? Especially prior to the Juventus game, where our record against Napoli and Juventus Milan was like 9 games, 8 losses and 1 draw or something like this. And in that time, like a draw against Napoli seemed like a positive result, despite surrendering the win twice. We won against Juventus, and that was like such an important step. And it was like one of those games where you rightly described it as by hook or crook. Doesn't matter how rain, hail, or shine. Doesn't matter the controversy, the shithousery. Doesn't matter if we had to fucking lie, cheat, or steal our way there. Not saying that we did, but the important thing was just to get that fucking W so that we can build upon that. And we immediately followed that up by falling flat on our faces against Bodø Glimt. So this is the perfect test for us to kind of get back on the horse in the most literal meaning of the term. This is obviously a big match in the scope of our season because it's imperative that we progress in the Champions League. We've got a difficult task to overturn a 2-goal deficit. And at the same time, the opponent is, they're not like a big name, they're not a Napoli, they're not a Milan, they're not a Juventus. They stung us and they made us look like fools. We've got egg on our face. So the onus is upon us to perform. So I really see this game as like the perfect test for us at this stage in the season, maybe leading up to the derby. because the derby might be too big for us. I'm going to be real. Maybe the derby is just too big for us at this stage in time. Even if we lose the derby, we still might win the title. But, as we discussed against Juventus, our performance against a 10-man Juventus was hardly inspiring. So considering that's where we're at, I really think this is like the perfect test, the perfect litmus test to see where we are at in these big games, in these big spots, in our ability to dig deep, respond to adversity, and to come up with something memorable when the spotlights are on, when the eyes are on, and when the need is there for us to achieve this goal. So I want to see a big performance. I'm going to lose my shit if we go out meekly. And although this team is, one that will make you want to hurl yourself out of a building sometimes, we reluctantly have no choice but to stick with it and to the bitter end. So let's just get over this test and see where the chips fall, eh? So, Forza Inter.
That's right. Let's go.
Come on.